Hi, Anthony Fosicek at Ohio Daily. I'm here with Brian Wright of Real Reform Done Right, Issue 5. We're talking a little bit about the campaign finance reports, which just came out yesterday. Brian, why don't you
Sure.
tell me your assessment here?
Oh, absolutely. What happened yesterday, we had the pre-general campaign finance reports uh, were submitted. And what we're seeing here is our opponents, the Issue 6 campaign, have filed a report with some $600,000 on it. And it was one of our concerns that we've had all along here, which is that you have a situation where business is working actively to create a new structure of government here in Cuyahoga County. We have situations where it's consistently contributions from $20,000 all the way up to $50,000. These are big dollars. These are dollars that are not coming from the people; they're coming from companies. And I think what we can get from it is pretty clear. I mean, what we're seeing is a group of people who worked behind closed doors to create the Issue 6 plan. They didn't look to get the input of the public. They've got a structure here which is essentially, or can be compared to a CEO type structure with a small board of directors. And quite frankly, if you have a business structure in place, what's the priority of business? What's the priority of government? Well, government's top priority is to the people. And businesses, well, the business priority is to business. So it's a clear fault with the Issue 6 proposal. I think what we're seeing here in this campaign finance report illuminates that. You simply cannot develop a new government structure by a small group of elites behind closed doors. And I think what we're seeing here is a direct result of that.
And there's no limit to what people or corporations can give in this race, correct?
That's right. We have a dynamic here in Cuyahoga County where reform is actually being, the whole reform movement is being fueled by corruption that's taken place in the county. And if you're going to reform county government, you've got to do it in the right way. You've got to take a look at what we have and how can we improve that. And if you're looking at corruption as a key problem, well, you want to tackle the things that foster corruption. The Issue 6 proposal does not do that. In fact, when you review it, it's pretty clear that what it's actually doing is fostering corruption rather than preventing it. And just as you mentioned, one of the key pieces that's missing here is any sort of restrictions on campaign contributions from employees to elected officials, as well as limits on contributions to elected officials from places like big business.
The Plain Dealer ran an article today where they highlighted some of the top donors for each side, and I think on the Issue 5 side, the top couple of donations were, under 10,000 or in that ballpark.
For Issue 5, yeah, we actually vast majority of our contributions were $100 or less. We had one contribution that was $10,000.
But that was the max.
That was the max. It was from Teamsters. Everything else was significantly lower. We had a handful of people who were able to donate between between $1,000 and maybe a few 5,000. But the vast majority was $100 or less. It's a grassroots campaign that we're running here.
But Issue 6, it's $50,000 from this corporation, 50, 60 from another corporation.
Exactly. It's a who's who of corporations in the area, and they're looking to influence the way government is structured in the county.
And if, and this is something we talked about in another interview we did with State Representative Foley and Harriet Applegate, but if Issue 6 passes, this county executive, and the county board all would be elected with no caps at all in these elections. So it's entirely possible that you could, and you kind of touched on this, you could be looking at a situation where you've got even more corruption.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, the kind of shady, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your stuff that's been discussed or covered in the Plain Dealer the last few months, but just straight up people buying 11 seats and a county executive.
Yeah. And on top of that, you have a government structure that the Issue 6 charter promotes here, which makes business a greater priority than the other things the county does. Business is the top priority. Well, The job of county government is to provide services to the people, health and human services, things that seniors, the disabled, children and families count on.
How does issue 6 even? I mean, have they even talked about finance reform or?
They have, and it actually came up after we had brought out that Bill Mason had raised a significant, who's a prosecutor here in the area, that he had raised well over $100,000 from his employees. We brought that to the attention of the local media. They made a big story about it, and all of a sudden, we had a situation where they were then saying, oh, I'm going to give the money back and we'll make sure that we look to put finance limits in this next plan. But the problem with that is we'll look to make sure. The reality is people are voting on a proposal right now, a government charter that does not include those. And we can talk about possibly including it at another date. But the reality is right now what voters are looking at does not include that, and if it include those restrictions. And quite frankly, if this were to pass, it may never include those restrictions. There's no guarantee there, unlike the issue 5 proposal where when we looked at this, and you had mentioned Representative Foley earlier, Representative Foley had gone to a few of the meetings when they were putting the issue 6 proposal together. And he and Jim Rokakis, who's county treasurer here, had both mentioned their concerns about campaign finance restrictions. Well, they were flat out ignored. And they continued to be ignored until we brought it to the attention of the public. And I think that underlines one of the key differences between our campaigns here, is that you have issue 6, which was clearly developed behind closed doors by a group of people who appointed themselves to be the makers of the next county government and are certainly sponsored by the biggest businesses in town, compared to us, which is a grassroots campaign where what we're promoting is a process of transparency, open, inclusive way to build your government. We know for a fact that the issue 6 program is so flawed, it could be very damaging to the county if it were to go into place. So what we want to do, this is a very important thing, what we want to do is take a step back and say, look, let's get this right. Let's get this right the first time, because fixing it down the road is much more difficult than fixing it right now. So what we have is a slate of 14 candidates who have taken a pledge. Representative Foley is one of them. Harriet Applegate is another one of them. It's a very diverse group of committed people who have taken a pledge to ensure that there are restrictions on campaign finance in the next charter. They've also pledged to include economic development as a component of the next county government, but more importantly, they've pledged to make it an open, inclusive process where everyone's voice is going to be heard. Because when you have situations where people like Representative Foley and Treasurer Rokakis are voicing their concerns and they're not being included into the plan that they're putting before the voters, it's a perfect example of why or how something like this gets flawed. And quite frankly, when you're changing the structure of government, you just can't afford to make those kinds of mistakes.
Anthony Fosicek from Ohio Daily. I'm here with Brian Wright of Real Reform Done Right, Cuyahoga County Issue 5, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.